This is the Retrol SE-03 stationary mill steam engine from Engine DIY. I'm Darren, and this is the Industrial Revolution. So I did a video a while ago on model steam engines, and we talked about why they're so important. They were used by engineers designing new steam engines to try out new things, see how things worked. It's a whole lot safer and cheaper to build something this size than it is to build something 20 feet tall. They're used by salespeople because you can carry something like this around and show it to factory owners, and you're trying to sell steam engines to them. And they're also used by students. And students could use these because you can actually manipulate the pieces by hand. Try doing this on a giant steam engine. Not to mention that for the most part, you're probably running it if you've got something that big. So as a student, you can try things out and actually handle things on this very inexpensively and realistically a lot safer than on a standard commercial steam engine. It's actually like full size and running. Well, today we're going to be students. And before we go any further, I want to say a couple of things. This is my first sponsored video. Engine DIY did send this to me free. They are offering a 15% discount to all of my viewers. If you check the link down in the description, if you click on that link and enter the discount code in the description, you'll get a 15% discount on anything in their shop. They have gas-powered and steam-powered engines there, and they'll also send a small percentage back to help the channel out. They did not put any constraints on what I said about the engine, though. So one of the interesting things about this engine, this isn't the way it shows up. It takes a little bit of work. Let's go take a look at that part. So let's take a look at what we have here. This is the box that I received. Instructions, probably useful. Set that over there. Okay. Several layers of parts here. Well, this is nice. This is the firebox and boiler combined here. Pretty heavy too. A little electric generator here. This is the cylinder and piston and valve gear and crank for it. And this looks like all the little tiny pieces, including the 10,000 or so screws down here for it. And on the bottom here, the piece I know I need to start with, which is the base. It's cool, you can get the little sight glass here, the water glass, to tell the water level in the boiler. Hey, it's Editing Darren here. Don't get scared away by this construction stuff. If you want to completely skip the construction, just go up to this timestamp here. It'll take you right past it. If you want to skip ahead to see this actually run, go to that timestamp over there. Also have chapters throughout the whole video, so you can jump from section to section. So let's get back into the video. That part goes up and it goes around this way, I think. Yep, goes in there like that. One thing with these little tiny screws, I have an IT background, I'm used to working with little tiny screws. If you don't have that background, you do need to be a little more careful with the screws potentially. They will tend to strip out pretty easily. The kit comes with all the tools you need. And I'm just barely screwing these things on, so they're
they're not snugged. And the reason for that is I expect things will need to shift a little bit as we go. If you haven't done this kind of assembly before, you may not have run into that, but that's a pretty common thing as you go. The other thing, like this one's a little bit funny going in. Sometimes if you run them backwards, just turn it backwards a half a turn. That'll help to line it up. Here's the governor. If you aren't familiar with governors, the way these work, this was an invention by James Watt. These balls, the faster it goes, the balls will spin out. As they spin out, it pulls up on this lever over here. And you see the lever here that gets pulled up. That adjusts this, which adjusts this, and that adjusts the valve. So the idea is these will control your maximum speed. So if you start to go too fast, it'll go way up here, and it'll start to cut off your steam. If it starts to go too low, if you get more load on it, it'll drop down here and you'll get more steam, ideally keeping you in the same place all the time. So I said this was a James Watt invention, and really cool. It has it. It looks like it's actually a functional part on this as well. Okay, let me show you how this works. You can see there's a little hole through the center of this. So as the governor rotates faster and slower, that actually turns this pin, and that's going to open and close that valve, sort of like a ball valve inside of there. That slips inside of this component here with an O-ring on it. So it controls the amount of steam pressure that comes through this. This is actually one of the cool things about building one of these is you've probably not thought about those guide rails before. But those are essential because that's what keeps your piston moving straight in and out before it goes to the crank. If you don't have the guide rails, it's going to be putting a lot of strain on your piston, and that's going to break things. And again, I'm not really cranking down at any of these to get them real tight yet. And when you do work through something, make sure that everything still moves freely. So you can see this still slides in and out nicely here, because your piston's in here. And you can see the slide is moving through there okay. And the reason for not putting anything in tight, I just installed this backwards. See this piece? That has to be over on the other side. So I have to rotate that around. Okay, so I'm about to attach this assembly onto the main base plate. And once I do that, I'm not going to be able to get to those bottom screws anymore. So everything's moving pretty smoothly in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just tighten these screws down just a little bit more. So I've got on the tip of the Allen wrench here, which hopefully will let me get it. And I'm working over this little bowl that I've got here. Hopefully I can get that into that hole and get it tightened onto the shaft. And it looks promising. The eccentric off of the flywheel, as the flywheel turns, that will adjust the valve gear in and out. So this shaft, and in fact here you can see this little piece here on the shaft is cut out here. This little shaft here is cut out. See it against my thumb here. That's how a valve gear works. So as this moves in and out, that's going to change the directions that the steam's flowing. The steam's going to be, so you've got your inlet and exhaust there. I've got a video on how that works more in depth. But yeah, this is going into the same block that the piston's in, and that's going to control the valve gear. Let me show you where we are. It's not all attached yet. We've got the flywheel here, and that's this rod over here is the piston to the crank. This goes to the valve gear, which is changing the directions. This is actually a double acting cylinder here. So being a double acting cylinder, it changes which way the exhaust and the inlet are going. Look at this. There's a little eye bolt here for using a crane to lift up the generator. Nice attention to detail. So I'm not sure why they put this in here. I could see potentially this being a wick. I'll check on that later, but I don't think this is actually a wick. This feels like cotton. So it turns out that that big cotton ball actually is a wick, and it turns out it actually is cotton. I was able to confirm that with my engine DIY rep. They use cotton because it burns quick and fairly cleanly, and to be fair, it's fairly cheap. Unfortunately, after you've run the engine a few times, this is all that's left of the one that I started with. If I got another one of these today, I think what I'd probably do is use a quarter or a third of that strip of cotton that came as the wick, and when it burns down to look like this, I'd just go to the next piece. You can buy the cotton in any craft or hobby store. Make sure it's pure cotton and white. A better option would be to get ceramic fiber that's used by glass blowers, both big furnace glass blowers, but also people who are doing like beadwork. So again, you might find that at a hobby store. Amazon certainly sells it. Any hot glass supply place will sell it. The ceramic fiber will probably last you forever. If you know somebody who's doing hot glass work, they may have some of it laying around. They can give you a little piece of it, because obviously you don't need much. Let's get back to the video. I'm going to attach the water level gauge here. It's really cool, and they actually include a second piece of glass for that as well, in case you break the first one. I think that's a spare. So as you're starting to attach things onto here, the water level gauge, and the pressure gauge and stuff, all these go on with O-rings. So you have to pull out these little tiny, nearly invisible O-rings again. So I'll get both of those in there. Just going to lay this on its side here. I think that's going to make it easier to get this bolt on here. Make sure the O-rings are on there. Okay. So this is the filler cap. And the filler cap here, you see it doesn't have a its own O-ring because it has that big black O-ring on there because you're taking this on and off all the time. And the other thing about the filler cap, there's also your pressure relief valve. So if it goes over pressure, it'll blow out of here. And that should go into the last hole I have. And that does it. And it tells you if it looks like that, you must be done. So it looks like that, so I must basically be done. So now the only problem is, of course, I have no water or fuel. So I have to go get those. Hey, welcome back. So all told, it took about 2.5 hours to assemble this whole thing. It did come in pretty complete condition. I know I've read some stories about needing to like tap holes and screws don't fit and stuff. And actually this worked really well for the assembly. I did drop one of these little tiny screws here into the carpet, and they include some extra screws, except that one. They don't include a spare for some reason. But I did find it, and it would have been fine without that one, honestly. So the assembly was pretty easy. This is my 4th time, I think, trying to get this to light.
And that's something that's important to understand about these model steam engines. This is a real steam engine, of course. This is very, very thin brass. It's a vertical Cornish boiler, so you've got a water jacket on the outside and it's hollow through the core, and it doesn't hold a lot of water. It also only holds a very small amount of fuel down here, so it won't stay lit very long and won't boil very long. I got this in January, didn't want to light this inside for safety considerations, didn't want to deal with the fumes inside. I have low ceilings, very sensitive smoke detectors, so I wanted to light it outside. If it's cold, this isn't going to run. So first time I tried lighting, it was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside, well below freezing. And I had a couple little minor leaks, and I thought that might be the problem. Fixed those, went out and tried it again. Still wouldn't go. Went out when it was 50, but with a cold wind, still couldn't get it to light. And the problem is, with the thin brass and with the limited fuel, you have to heat up this, you have to heat up your pipe, you have to heat up your valve gear here, and the piston, and by the time it was getting close to being heated, I was out of fuel. So I couldn't get it to run. So I got this in January. It's actually now middle of April as I'm filming this, but it's a nice day out today. It's fairly comfortable out here. You can tell I'm not like buried in jackets and hats and stuff like I was in the earlier videos. Couple of safety things before we get started. This is a real steam engine. It can actually have all the problems of real steam engines. It does have a safety overflow valve on it here. The water fill valve here is actually, if you take a look at this, the water fill valve actually is a pressure relief valve here as well. But that doesn't guarantee absolute safety. This all gets very hot, so you can burn yourself on it. You will have boiling water coming off of this thing. The exhaust line is right here. You'll have water and steam coming off of the drain cock valves here when you're getting it going. When it's fully running and operational, even if there's no other leaks, and I've never seen a steam engine that doesn't have leaks, out of this pipe right here, you're going to have the exhaust. And by the time it gets here, it's going to be cooled down. So you could have boiling water shooting out of here. Make sure you set this on something that's fireproof, and make sure you set this on something that isn't going to mind a bunch of water on it and hot water, and watch your hands. The fuel pan in here is very shallow. It's just a real shallow cup that you fill with fuel. It's very easy to splash over the top of that, at which point you can drip fuel down below here. And if you're using, well, depending on what fuel you're using, the flame might be completely invisible. So let's talk about what we need to add to here. Distilled water. It does say in the instructions to use purified water. The reality is, use distilled. With all these little tiny pipes, the last thing you want to get in there is any kind of mineral buildup. So just get distilled water. It's cheap. I paid $1 for that, I think, at the grocery store. Fuel-wise, this is what I'm running. This is 95% alcohol. It's denatured alcohol. Actually, it might be a little more than 95. They say to use at least 95% alcohol for this. The easiest way to get that is denatured alcohol. Every hardware store sells this. It's over by the paints and paint thinners. So before we get started, let's actually talk about the parts on here. And since we've got this, and since we can poke around at it, let's go ahead and do that a bit. So this engine is not modeled after any specific engine. It's a bunch of different parts. So the cylinder here, which is a piece of this single block here, is a double-acting cylinder, which was invented by James Watt in 1782. The valve gear here is behind it. The governor up here, you can see the spinning here. That was invented by James Watt in 1788. It's a rotational engine, obviously. That was invented by James Watt in 1782, along with the double-acting cylinder. The steam crank here, which is this part right here, Cranks have been around in water wheels and in windmills for quite a while, but for steam that was first invented by James Picard in 1780. The DC generator is in the back here. That's from the mid to late 1800s. And the boiler here, this is a fluid boiler. So you have a water jacket and an empty core. The flame goes up through that. That's a Richard Trevithick invention from 1812. In the horizontal form, this would be called a Cornish boiler. The vertical followed soon afterwards. So now let's take a look at what we need to do to actually get this thing ready to fire and see if we can get it to fire up. Okay, so first we're going to fill the water here. Just unscrew this this cap. It's cold now, so this is cool. Once this is running, this will be very hot. And I get this little tiny hole. I recommend something like this. You can buy these for, well, these were I think $6 or $7 at my local drugstore. Or the farm supply place, I got 2 of them for I think $3 right across the street. Because you have to be able to get something into there. I've seen people use funnels and stuff too. While you're filling this, you're watching right here. That's your water gauge. Just fill it till it's about half to 3/4 full up there. You do want to go slow once it starts coming up because it does fill up pretty quickly here. It's starting to come up here. You can see it just starting to come up on that column. When you're running this, never let that run dry. It seems like I'm putting a lot of water in here. This is a fairly small syringe. Almost half full there. Okay, it's about 3/4 full, so that's good. So how much water did that take? I had to dump the distilled water into here. Not very much water in there at all. Let's move on to the fuel. But inside of here, there's this little tiny fuel cup. And you want to fill it part way. You don't want to overflow that. And you have to be careful because there's not a lot of space in there. So we're going to use the same syringe. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. Use a different syringe, make sure it's labeled. Use a different syringe. You don't want to mix your fuel and water here. Stick it in and very gently spray it into there. If you go fast, you'll go right over the top, and that's a problem. Now this fuel, and most of the fuels that you can get that are actually 95% alcohol, it burns very invisibly. So you want to make sure you're not putting fuel someplace that you don't want it, because you won't be able to see this flame. You want to also make sure, actually that's just about full there, I think. So it doesn't take much fuel. And now before you light it, set this aside. So a few things you want to have handy before you light this. First is this little piece that they send you. This will actually extinguish your flame. As soon as we light it, we're going to close this door. And then you put this on top of here, and with that door closed and that up on top, that cuts off your fuel supply. It cuts off your air supply, excuse me, and the fire goes out. So make sure you have that handy. And tweezers, because all these things are going to be pretty warm here. So you're not going to want to be handling some of them by hand. once they get hot. So we start off, we open both of these drain cocks here. There's cylinder drain cocks, one on each side of the cylinder. And what these do, when we light this, you're going to get steam coming out of here and coming down here. It's going to be condensing. It's going to go into this big brass block here. It's going to condense even more. You're going to get water there. In a bigger steam engine, you can actually blow the cylinder heads off if you have water there, and you just like slam up against it with a piston. Probably not going to happen here, but it also won't run. So you want to keep those open. Let's go ahead and get this lit, and we'll talk a little bit more. As I mentioned, it is invisible flame. You cannot see it, but you can feel it if you put your hand up here. I think it's still running. I can also smell it. The smell is rather strong, and the wind is blowing in my face right now. So let's move to the side a bit. What you need to do now is wait for this to come up to temperature and get some pressure going. You got the steam valve right here. It's not actually calibrated terribly well, but you get the needle on the front and actually on the back. If we take a look here, on the back here, you can see it also has this little lever here, so you can tell from either side what your pressure looks like. So it will take a couple minutes to come up to pressure. So while we're waiting, we can talk a little bit more about what we have here. If you notice I'm sliding more to the side, it's because the wind is blowing the exhaust in my face here. So you have the flywheel here, and the flywheel up to the governor here. The governor connects in, as we discussed earlier, over here to this valve, which can increase or decrease the steam going into the cylinder, or actually into the valve gear and then into the cylinder. As this turns, so you get the piston moving in and out, and you have that going to the crank here. Once this is running, and we actually have something running usefully here, this does have a generator on it as well. You can throw this switch. We have the generator and a light. You have a valve here at the top, and that valve will open the steam into the valve gear once we're at pressure. And we're not at pressure yet, so we can't do it yet. But I can tell from just the smell here, this is still running. So we'll just let this warm up, and it should be up to pressure here in a minute. A little bit of water, a little bit of steam here out of the whistle. The whistle here unfortunately seems to leak a bit. So what I find you need to do is just come down here and just push that up, and that kind of seals that. It still leaks a little, but you can just close that up, and it does a pretty good job. A little leakage there is not going to really hurt anything. Also with the whistle, if you need to dump pressure, you can pull that down, and that dumps pressure. The whistle here goes straight into the boiler. We're coming up to pressure, but nothing on the pressure gauge yet, so we're not too much pressure yet, but we're getting there. See, even though the steam valve's closed, there's a little leakage around it. You can see some water dripping down here. It's coming through the valve gear and out the cylinder drain cocks. And that's okay. That shouldn't cause a problem. As long as you're not losing too much there, it should be fine. Okay, thought I was out of fuel. I'm not. It's just the wind is making it a little chilly there. I almost put some more fuel in and saw that there's still a little bit of liquid on the bottom there. Caught a tiny wisp of flame, so it's almost out. One odd thing about this, you see the water level is actually going up, and that's because an air bubble got in down here somewhere, and it's pushing it up. So air bubbles aren't so much of a problem in real steam engines, although if you look on a real steam engine, you'll actually have a valve on the top and the bottom, and that lets you drain that out and flush it out in the event you get gunk or whatever in there. Usually they're big enough around that an air bubble won't cause a problem, but this is really tiny, so you can get air bubbles in there that create issues. Okay, putting another batch of fuel into here. Again, be very careful not to overfill it. That's about all that'll take. One interesting way you can tell if this is lit, since you can't see the fire, on this lighter, on most lighters, if you pull the trigger but don't pull it to the point it clicks, if it lights, that means there's fire inside already. If it doesn't light, that means it wasn't lit, and then you can actually go ahead and light it. In this case, because it's windy out here today, this is blowing out. That flashback you just saw, that actually happens when you get a bunch of wind up underneath it. And I've seen that happen on steam trains. It fills the cab with flame. It actually put the flame out in this case. So there might be so much wind up through underneath here that it's not able to actually get up to pressure. So as you can see here, I've actually moved back inside, and the reason is the wind that you can probably hear outside my garage here. The wind was just sucking the heat off the outside of the boiler and also kept blowing out the flame, so it just wasn't working well. So I'm back inside now in my garage. I have my garage door open, the human-sized door, not the car-sized door. So I've got good ventilation in here, but hopefully I'm not going to have the wind in here. So it's lit now, and it's coming up to temperature, and hopefully we come up to steam pressure here soon, and we'll be able to actually get this thing to run. So we'll wait for this to come up. Let's talk about some of the things that I like about the kit and some of the things I don't like about it. One of the things that I like about it, this is a really beautiful kit. This is a really nice looking steam engine. One of the things I don't like, I've had a lot of trouble getting it to run, and that's mostly because really thin metal, small firebox and small boiler. There's a reason they did that, of course. They could have made this heavier metal, they could have made a bigger boiler, they could have made a bigger firebox. It would have taken longer to actually come up and run. And that means that instead of taking a couple minutes to heat up or 5 minutes to heat up, you might take 30 minutes to heat up. Something that actually happens in real steam engines. The thin metal also means it really doesn't work well in the cold. That's why if you look at steam locomotives, you have the boiler cylinder, you have a bunch of insulation, and then you have a steel jacket around the outside of that. Here, no insulation, no jacket. And that means that that heat just radiates off of here really quickly. Check the temperature again. Another thing that would be nice is a few more screws, extra O-rings, but didn't come with those. It wasn't a big deal. The screws are standard size, the O-rings are standard size. But just have had some challenges getting it going. Also that wick, and if you saw that during the construction, that white fluffy stuff I pulled out of the firebox, that was wick. Presumably that is supposed to be a ceramic fiber, and that will hold up really well to the flames. In this case, it's not holding up that well, and I saw a number of videos where people had to replace it. If we look inside of here, it's dark enough now you can actually see the flame flickering behind the door. That's something you often don't see outside. In fact, I couldn't see it at all outside because the flame was just nearly invisible. You see here the pressure's coming up. See on the pressure valve here. So let's go ahead and start the engine process up here. I'm going to first make sure these are open, and they are a few turns, and I'm going to just open up that valve that's hot. Let's go ahead and open the steam valve up here. Let's see, you've got steam coming out of here mostly. Let's go ahead and close these up. And there it's running. I'm not sure how long this is going to run. There's still plenty of water. I'm not sure how the firing here is doing. And maybe I should let it get a little bit more steam first. Okay, so I just added some more fuel to this. It had run out of fuel. One thing that some people have mentioned online makes these work better is the wick is kind of iffy. You may have to replace that. And after you've run it a few times, you will have to replace it. Your best bet is probably a ceramic fiber. Glass workers use that. It's fairly cheap. One person was actually using a steel scrub, like the little coiled steel, not steel wool. Steel wool will burn by itself. The little coiled steel scrub pad. And he had one of those in there and it was working well for him. Kind of keeping an eye on the pressure here. Remember, it's a real boiler. You got to be careful with actual pressure. So as we light this up, the things that I really like about it, it's a beautiful model. Things I don't like about it, this tube could be a little bit bigger diameter. You see there's a little steam bubble in here now that's making it hard to tell with the water level. The whistle leaks a little, but that's not a big deal. Keep an eye on steam pressure here so I can get this going again here in a second. But in general, it's a really good model. And if you want a steam engine to play with, you can learn a lot from something like this. And engineers have been using these for hundreds of years. Salespeople, students like us have been using them for centuries as well, as we try to learn how steam engines work. So, let's see, we are just starting to get a little bit of steam here. So we'll give it just a minute and we'll see if we can light this up again. Remember, if you'd like to buy something like this, Engine DIY is offering all of my viewers 15% off of everything in their shop. They have this one, they have probably 100 other gas and steam engines as well. Click on the link in my description and use the discount code and you get 15% off everything at their store. Okay, let's see if we can open this up again. And this one's even starting on its own. So, models like this, they've been with us for centuries, steam engines, with just about everything else in the Industrial Revolution. And models like this are the Industrial Revolution. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. You can really help us out by like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe over here. And that really helps out. And comment. I love reading your comments, and I usually respond pretty quick. If you want to see more videos on the Industrial Revolution, click the playlist over here, or the one up here that YouTube thinks you'll really enjoy next. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.